I called them up and I was essentially like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Because, like, is this just bad luck?
Welcome to the Active Hub podcast.
Conversations to motivate, inspire, and encourage you on your movement journey.
I'm your host, Ricky Bolmers.
And I'm your co-host, JT. Welcome back to another episode of the Active Hub podcast. If it's your first time here, thank you for joining us. And to all our regular listeners, thank you for all your support. Today we have a very special guest. We have Lily Ford here. Lily is a holistic wellness advocate with a big voice in the mental health space and as well on the ban of vapes. She's been on different TV programs, interviews, and social media sharing her story. So thank you for being with us, Lily, today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
It's great to have you.
Yeah.
We normally like to start with some questions.
Sure.
So it breaks the ice, mainly for myself.
Okay, perfect.
Warms my voice up. All right, so are you a morning or a night person?
I'm definitely a morning person. I would have said night person probably 2 years ago if you'd caught me then, but also wouldn't have been doing this then. So definitely morning person.
Yeah. Now, you got a coffee today, but would you prefer coffee or tea regularly?
That's hard because of my English heritage.
Yes.
I don't want to offend anyone. I don't know. I would say coffee only because my dad makes like these beautiful coffees at home. He's got like the big industrial coffee machine. So
It's huge flex, yeah.
Do you have a favourite cafe you want to shout out?
Ooh. I live around the corner from Upton Girl in Windsor, so shout them out maybe.
To try it.
Abacus in South Yarra is beautiful,
Yeah,
and that's a good one. Like post Pilates class, me and friends usually walk there.
Yeah.
What is your favourite way to unwind?
Ooh. I have a few different ways of unwinding, really, because I sort of pin that down to well-being and self-care routines. But I would say journaling, listening to music, creating playlists, making a safe space for myself. It might be lighting a candle or spending time alone. Sometimes it's just, putting in my headphones and being with my thoughts just for a hot second. Might have a hot shower, those sorts of things.
Sounds very peaceful.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's like
What are you gonna do today?
dating yourself.
Yeah.
Well, essentially it is.
Beautiful. I like it.
I reckon this would be a tough question. What's one thing you can't live without? If it was me, I feel sad, but I would have to say my phone. Cause I know it's sad, but like the other day, my phone like screen went blank, and I like fully had like just stressed out so much, and I was like, wow, this is bad. But I guess that would probably be the one thing for me. So, what do you think? Something you couldn't live without?
I don't want to say something like really dumb, but my breath.
I was going to say oxygen, so...
Yeah,
Only because like I've tapped into the power of sort of like breath work and the importance of being present and this idea of breath and sort of being in your body and grounding you to a very moment is so special. It just allows you to enjoy life a little bit better.
Like conscious breathing, I guess.
Yeah.
Is breathwork something you do like every day, or...?
I would like to think that I do it every day, but I don't. Probably at least once a week. But I just watch YouTube videos for the most part. I would say roughly 2 times a week.
Yeah. And what does that look like? I've never done breath work, so...
I do it in sort of 2 different ways. I like to think of it. So the first one is through watching videos online, just because it's in your pocket, you can get it out anywhere. Recently went back to the UK and I was doing breath work on YouTube. There was this creator called Breathe with Sandy, and he sort of starts off his videos with like, hello guys, welcome back. And it's very sort of like, it cuts through the silence whenever you play it. But I think he plays his own instruments. Like it's a very... serene experience, and he's also doing the breath work in it, and it would just be like the most magnificent background you've ever seen, overlooking the ocean or in some like beautiful location. So he's really cool. And then the second place is the Breath House, which is also in Windsor, which is closer to where I'm living, which is actually a space where it's actually in a basement, so you go down the elevator and it's this beautiful lit up space, and it's an hour of sort of like that intensive breath work. They've got 2 options. They've got like your LSD, which is more sort of like, I think, your beginner friendly class, and then they've got your release, which is my personal favorite, which is a little bit more full on.
I like big breaths.
I
like
to
pass out.
It's, I don't know, I brought my parents to an LSD one, and they thought that was great, and they were saying immediately they reckon they could have gone on to release, just because I think my dad's a swimmer. Also, my mum's very sporty, so they were already in a good place to begin with. But I really like the release one because it's almost like your body is in this sense of hyperventilation, yet your mind is in deep meditation.
Wow.
So yeah, it's kind of like you're vibrating.
Yeah,
that's cool.
An easy one is the 3-3-3 method, or like the box method, where it's
the box breathing. Yeah,
like you like hold your breath for 3 seconds, breathe in for 3 seconds, hold, and then out for 3 seconds.
Yeah,
that's like they've got it on the Garmin watch. They've got like a breathe work thing that does that for you. But I find that one's easy to follow. So
yeah, I like the breath retention ones if I'm ever on YouTube, but some of them, like I've done 2.5 minute or sometimes even 3 minute breath retentions where you're just holding your breath for like a certain amount of time, and you almost feel yourself go lightheaded and you're tingling, and then you come back and you're straight back into the body doing like an intensive cycle. Like, it's just incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try it.
Yeah, definitely, it's a good thing for you.
I'm a swimmer, so that's a bit
it's
of breath
perfect
work.
Goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
This is my favourite question of all time. It might not be yours, but scrunch or fold when it comes to toilet paper?
Fold. Easy.
Good. Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, you're about the
There's
same
only
as 90%.
Scrunch? Yeah, there's only one way.
So from what have we had? We've had 12 guests on about that. We've had Ricky and one other person say scrunch. So
everyone else judged me.
Yeah.
As they should.
What?
All right. I'll have to change my ways.
That's okay. You do you.
So now that we've gotten a bit warmed up, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? Just a brief overview of like family dynamic, growing up, study, work, that kind of thing, just to get the listeners to know you a bit better.
Yeah, it's like a little psych consult almost. So I am in a family of 4. I grew up on the sunny Mornington Peninsula in Mount Eliza, and so I went to a school which was a stone's throw from me, overlooking the ocean, so Kanyang Primary School.
Oh, that's where my son goes.
So nice, right?
Yeah, unless it's windy.
Yeah, there's
the poor lollipop lady's trying to hold his sign.
It can be, yeah. I have such like fond memories of when I was there when I was younger, and like just walking home, and we had like such a great sort of like family life family dynamic back then. Like I reflect on that time, and so nicely that sometimes I cry about it. So
that's good.
I just remember like my mum and dad taking me on, and my brother on like beautiful days out. We'd go to like the Enchanted Maze, or we'd go to a farm or a winery with friends, or we had friends that had this magnificent property in Muradak, and so we'd ride horses. And like my childhood was full of these like really sweet memories of trying new things, but just thoughtful living.
Sounds wonderful.
It was I reflect on my childhood really fondly. It was a very very happy childhood. And then we only recently moved round the corner, so still sort of around the area, and that's cool. My parents are in the process of renovating at the moment, which is something.
Yeah,
something.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Are they living there while they're renovating?
Yeah. So they've done little bits, but initially when they first got it, I was living out the back, but now I'm up in a share house, so not at home anymore really. And then so back to when I was younger. So dad is in the medical sort of space, and then mum initially was in the teaching space, but she also had her own business called Body Bump, where she would train pregnant women through, like at pools.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and my mum was always like very sporty. Like I remember distinctly, I'd have friends like when I was at Kanyang, we'd come back and mum would be like, "Oh, girls, can you just hop in the pool quickly and pretend you're pregnant? And I'll get the floaties out and we'll do an upper aerobics course." And we'd have like Parachute by Tim-O-Matic playing on the speaker, and she'd be like, "And left, right," and that was sort of like my memory of my mum when she was in that little period of time.
So she doesn't do that anymore.
More, does she? I think she's phasing it out, but it's been around a long time. Now she's moved into the space of counselling, so she's actually an alcohol and drug counsellor.
Oh wow!
So
amazing.
We endured some trauma, and one of the cool byproducts is that she went into a mental health profession.
There we go.
Yeah, awesome. So then as for me, I was never sporty ever. I think I was forced to do...
You didn't like sport, or you weren't coordinated, or...
No, it was almost like I had an inability to do it. Like, it was, you'd throw a ball at me and I would quite literally move, like my hands would just miss each other.
Yeah.
And I couldn't keep up with it, I don't think. And I was a very sensitive child. So I was very sort of like introverted in a way. And I found that sports was very like for very extroverted people, and I left them to it. And you know, my mum was very extroverted and sporty, and I just never found that was like my space. I gravitated instead towards music. And so since I can remember, I was always doing music lessons, guitar, piano, singing, mix of the three. And so I did that all throughout school, and then in years 11 and 12 I picked up music as my tertiary subject. So I did music performance and music investigation, and that was in guitar, piano, singing, but also I was programming, it's like low-key DJing, programming a piano and singing at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And I had an incredible teacher, and his name was Mr. Spicer, and we're actually
Mr.
still in
Spicer.
touch.
Wow.
Yeah, so I reflect really fondly as well on that period of time too, because it was definitely my safe space. However, the school I went to also did mandatory Saturday sports.
Really?
What school did you go to?
Well, I don't know. That could be totally wrong. I don't want them to listen to it and think it's not mandatory, but
I don't think your school's going to listen
compulsory.
to this.
Compulsory, maybe. I don't know. And so my opted sports were lawn bowls and martial arts, because I was like, which ones can I move the least amount in?
Martial
essentially.
arts?
My friends and I just chased each other around with rubber knives.
Lawn bowls
Rubber
stuff.
knives.
I think we had like a session one day on like disarming.
And
And immediately we just started like messing around with these rubber knives. Anyways, so didn't actually retain any knowledge from that class, which is cool. But so it wasn't very sporty, and in fact didn't pick up sports at all until my transformation began, probably 2.5 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So no sports background. Is there anything else you want me to?
Well, I guess your studies, so you just nearly finished your degree, is that right?
Yes, so I'm about to finish my degree, about being end of next year. I will hopefully graduate. So I left school kind of knowing that I wanted to help other people. I had a little bit of clinical anxiety when I was at school, and I was medicated for that. And I think that in a way I thought was quite interesting on how that process sort of worked, and I was open to the idea of learning more about it. But what specifically made me choose the route of mental health is a totally unrelated and bizarre story. I had, because of my anxiety, a school psychologist that I would see, and you'd book it online, and then you'd go out of a class and you'd miss a class to go to the therapist. And so I had this psychologist, and I remember every time he'd speak to me, he'd blow my mind about reshaping the way I saw things. And, you know, I was quite young at the time. And I'd had like a few friends going through mental health stuff, so I wound up in his office more often than not. And one day when we were sort of speaking, I decided to flip the conversation back on him and start quizzing him about his life. And as he opened up more and more about sort of like his life, it was only little tiny bits. I didn't really get much out of him. He was kind of, it was like juicing a rock almost. It was a pretty sort of like like straight-faced guy. But I remember he was talking about his music taste and how he loved rock music. And then as he was talking about it, I think he just stretched and he did that or something. And his shirt moved up, and I could see that he had tattoos all over his body, and I thought, I want that. And it just set this tone about me where I was like, I want to be able to look into someone's eyes and be able to read them and analyze it from a different perspective and understand what perspective means in life, but also have my own layers like an onion. And so hence why I have lots of these tattoos from the beginning is because I was inspired in that way. Despite not aligning with them much anymore, that is what sort of set it up in the first place.
Wow.
That's fascinating.
It's definitely a lot deeper than why I got my tattoos, so...
The tattoo story is a little bit sort of weird though, because I think I initially set off with the idea of like them being sort of quite cool and having this like mystery about you. I'm not a very mysterious person. I've found I'm actually quite an open book, but I started, unfortunately, as time went on, getting tattoos as a form of like more self-harm. Like every time I was down, I would book one in, and they weren't well done. These have all been like kind of redone, covered up.
So we've mentioned a couple of times about you having a transformation journey and some things changing your life. Do you want to give us a bit of a lead up into what that is all about? From your teenage years, what that looked like.
Yeah. So my transformation journey is a very big story because there's so many different plot lines sort of like weaving in and out of each other. It's also where the story of like the vaping campaign comes in, and when I talk about like my introduction to vaping when I was sort of younger, and then how I picked it up and I was vaping more, and then eventually became sort of addicted around sort of like 18, 19, 20 until it was in sort of like full pursuit. Like that is one of many stories. Within that, there was also sort of like escapism and sort of like partying and drinking a lot, escaping how I was feeling. And then also within that is like depression, anxiety, suicidality. So it's all just like a big funk. And then also, as a sort of like sprinkle on top, is then the sports, which is like the running and then the fitness and that sort of side of things. So, the sort of crux of it is that there was this traumatic event that had happened, and instead of being able to sort of bounce back and be quite resilient to it, I had to start supporting the people around me, i.e. parents, family members, because I had this idea of mental health that I didn't see other people have. Maybe it's because I had the anxiety when I was younger and I'd been to a few like child psychologists and all that. I knew a little bit more about, say, someone that had never experienced anxiety in their life. And so then I could use the tools that I had learned through those to help the people around me. Plus I'd chosen it as a degree. So I'd experienced this and I stepped into this sort of like helper role, and within that process I totally lost myself. And when you experience something that's quite hectic and adverse and it comes out of the blue, and it can be anything, it looks different from person to person, it completely changes everything around you, and it's so unfair. Like, life can be unfair, but it really put into perspective so many things for me. Like, I lost essentially a majority of the friends that I was close with because I would change so much as a result of this all happening. And I lost sort of like my direction and my sense of purpose or my sense of self. So it was so much sort of sacrifice. And I wound up being in such a poor headspace that I started all these like self-destructive like little mechanisms. So I was vaping like a lot, to the point where like I couldn't have a conversation like this without it sort of like being there. And I could just like feel it, like wherever it was. It was almost like a presence that it had. Part
of your body almost. Like
Like if I had to leave the house, I needed my keys, my wallet and my vape, and if I didn't have it, it was literally like panic mode. There's all these memes that people post about, like, oh my god, where's my vape? But it's quite literally like the worst feeling of anxiety, because that was like my crutch. It was just like, where are you? And so I think that was one of the other things that I'd sort of like picked up as a coping mechanism alongside. I was drinking a lot, I was partying a lot, and I would do anything I could to not sit with myself and how I was feeling. I didn't really think at the time that sports had anything to do with it. It was only until I started like experimenting with that, and when I came out of it, that I was like, hey, this actually helps your mental health. But it's not like I was doing nothing when it was happening. I was going for the route of escapism, yet I was still in therapy. I was still calling different therapists a few times a week, being like, hey, I feel like my life's ending, so so what do I do now? I remember there was this one time like pacing around my garden, and it was something like the third really fucked up thing for the week had just happened, and I'm talking like sort of like would affect anyone. And I was like, all these things have happened and I can't wake up the next day without feeling anxious, because I'm just waiting for the next lot of bad news to come in, and it's just one thing after the next, and I haven't even got over the one before that. And so I called them up and I was essentially like, what am I doing wrong? Because like, is this just bad luck? I was really sort of struggling through that. And also with the service that I was calling, I think it was also young people my age probably picking up the phone trying to help me, and they were like, well, let's do some box breathing. Not really knowing sort of like how to handle it. To a point where I think maybe I was like almost a bit like psychotic about it, because I was like, how can I keep living this way? And so got diagnosed with depression. That was cool. That was a funny, actually, experience. Because there's always a bit of humour
Please tell.
twinkled in it. I thought I was having a heart attack, and I was having these heart issues. I remember waking up every day thinking like, oh my God, I'm just gonna die one morning from my heart. It couldn't be from the vape or the Red Bull that I had like literally last night, but you know, maybe I've got a heart issue. So I'm sort of like having these reoccurring like pains. I'm like not eating properly. I was having like all these stomach issues. I do think a lot of that does probably come down to the lifestyle I was living. However, I booked a GP appointment and a bunch of x-rays for my heart because I thought I was dying. And I went in and she was like, look, I don't think you have anything wrong with your heart based on all these scans. I think you have depression. I was like, huh?
Yeah.
How does that? But then, of course, like, I don't know. I think it was to do with, like, the anxiety and the coping. And she knew everything that was happening in my life. Yeah. And so I started to sort of, like, seek help clinically, like, through the typical way of, like, when someone has depression, I was medicated. And I think things got better a little bit, but also COVID was happening and I was isolated. And, there were just so many factors at play. It was just a very confusing time for me. And then eventually with all of this, it wasn't like a little blip of time. It happened over 2 years. It was a long period of time. Yeah, right. And I hit my rock bottom in 2022 to the point where I was like, I can't be here anymore. Like this is too hard to keep living like this. Yeah. And I had a partner. Me and my partner have been together almost 6 years. He's brilliant. He's really nice. He's like a chill surfer guy. Like he'll just go for a cruisy little surf. Like beautiful. He's really nice, very down to earth. If ever I'm like this, he's always like that, and he's a really positive influence on my life. So he sort of saw this all happening, and I think he was in a pretty low place too, just like watching it all, because how could you not? You're living with your partner and they're going through all this stuff. It does affect you. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, I can't keep living like this. Otherwise, I think I'm genuinely going to do something stupid. And I'd called up Beyond Blue maybe a couple of times. I remember there was one night in particular that was bad, but I was really struggling with finding enjoyment in life and purpose. And I literally was thinking, like, how is tomorrow going to be better? Because like I had no vision for it. I couldn't even like think about the next day. And I was sleeping so much of the time, and I was so unhealthy, and I was out of puff just walking down the street, likely from all the vaping, and I just sort of ruined myself. And we had this trip to Europe planned, me and my partner, post-COVID, which most people will be excited for. And I just remember having breakdown after breakdown, like hysterically sobbing, saying, but I have to come back from an amazing trip to this life.
Oh, wow.
And that is when that depression is sort of there, when you're like, you feel so hopeless and everything seems so bleak that there's just no point. So leading up to it, you know, my partner's really happy. He's like, what are you packing for Europe? And I'm like, a knife. Like, I cannot come home. I cannot keep doing this to myself. But not in a way of, I want to help myself. It was purely in a way of like, pity me. Like I was a victim to my own life. Anyways, we went on the trip. And I was in a pretty filthy mood for a majority of it. To be honest, I'm surprised that he stuck it through, because that was rough.
Was there surf around for him? Or?
No, there wasn't even surf around for him. So it came to going away and going to Thailand. But because of my vaping habits, I didn't realise that you can't actually have vapes in Thailand or the UK. And so I had to leave it at home. And I remember...
So it's like illegal, is it?
I don't know if it was legal or if it was the way that I'd looked into it or what, but I decided to leave it at home. And essentially I got to Thailand and I was just in the filthiest mood, because I was having these like withdrawals from the nicotine that I was just awful, really awful. I was not a nice person to be around. I was snappy, I was naggy, I was pessimistic, I was constantly complaining, I don't want to go home, and it was terrible. And it wasn't until I got to the UK and got a vape that I was sort of okay again. Perks of a nicotine addiction. Wow. But I went away, and then I remember I was staying with my grandparents, and I was calling my mum, and I was crying, and I was saying, I can't go home. Like I'm too scared to sort of say, like, I'm scared I'm going to hurt myself. But I was like, I can't keep doing it to myself.
So your family sort of didn't know how deep in this hole.
No, I think I was funny about how much I disclosed because I didn't
Yeah.
want to put any pressure on them
Yeah.
because of the whole sort of thing we'd experienced together.
Yeah.
So I was very conscious of not offloading on them.
Yeah.
So I did try my best to sort of keep it in.
Yeah.
Even my best friend at the time, I struggled to disclose things to her, and she had a pretty good wrap around mental health. You know, she was studying it too.
Yeah.
But I was too scared to say something that would put me in a situation where I would be judged for something that's way beyond my control.
Yeah.
Which in retrospect silly, but you know, when you're
pretty hard
experiencing
when you're in
it,
this space,
it's hard.
yeah.
And so my mum said, well, why don't you just like have a look at moving out and going on your own in the city for a bit? You know, you've always sort of talked about it, but like, why don't you create a plan?
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit to it. My poor partner's sitting there like, what about me? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I've got to do this for myself.
Yeah.
And it was this moment of like being so selfish that I needed that more than anything to get me through that period. So I made the really selfish decision to leave everything that I'd ever known on the peninsula. You know, my partners then had to move back home, and I moved away from that friend, and it was so difficult and so lonely. And I moved into a college dormitory with a bunch of other people. I was definitely the oldest person there, didn't know anyone there. I had raging anxiety and mental health issues, and you know, I was still vaping and still wanting to drink all the time, but it was just a new environment.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I first got there, every part of me was screaming, just like, go home. This is bad. You don't know anyone here. It's scary. But within the first 3 days, I had someone knock on my door saying, oh, do you want to come hang out with us? We're going to go watch the footy. It's like, you don't really watch the footy, but yeah, okay. And so I went out and I started making friends really organically.
Yeah.
And started putting myself out there a little bit more. And I made these two fantastic friends straight away, both English, in my college. And one of them actually came and sat in the bedroom with me until like the early hours of the morning, just talking about everything that I'd gone through to get to the place I was there.
That's awesome.
And she really sort of like helped me feel like I had made the right decision. And I have a brilliant bond with those girls. I just went back to the UK and saw both of them.
Oh, awesome.
And you know, they're doing really well, so it was lovely. But yeah, so essentially I was at college and again wasn't doing anything sports wise, but I started meeting friends and I started putting myself out there in this new environment, and I was going into the city, and you know, I was working an assortment of random jobs that didn't really align with my career, but I was a fair bit into my degree. And my partner would come up sometimes and stay with me at the college, or I'd go to his. And then I met a few girlfriends through the college, and they said, we want to get a share house. Do you want to come with? It's in Brunswick West, which is very far from the peninsula, I must say.
Yeah.
And I said, sure thing. So we moved into a share house. Naively, I did think that my mental health would just sort of like go quickly.
Yeah.
I wasn't on the medication anymore at this point, and I was still like trying to find myself, yet still whenever I could would reach for escapism. Like I had some friends that were sort of like, I knew that when I was around them I'd be drinking more and sort of like partying, and I still would gravitate towards those people because I still wanted to escape what had happened. I still wanted to forget. You know, healing isn't just like it gets better and better, like one day you're fine and one day you're not, and the grief just sits on you like a plank. And
that's well said.
So I struggled like specifically with grief, and then also guilt for what I'd left behind. And you know, I'd left a friend that had meant so much to me. Like I loved her like so much, but it was back to that sort of needing to be selfish. And I was in that share house for a bit and thought everything was sort of doing fine and dandy. I worked a few jobs that I got bullied at and was still met with a bit of pushback. Hadn't done any of the social media stuff yet. And I got a call from my placement, because you have to do social work placements as part of my degree. And they were like, well, your placement's fallen through. And I was meant to do support after suicide, which could have been quite triggering for me at the time. It had fallen through, and they're like, we don't really have anything for you. You might have to defer. So I had to find my own placement. And it wasn't until I found one on the peninsula that I was like, whoa, I'm going to have to move back home. Like, I'm going to have to go back into that space. I'd avoided being home at all costs. I did not want to go back down the peninsula. There were too many sad memories. Like every street I drove down felt like literally like a knife in my chest. Wow. Like it was so awful. Whereas like now, of course, like I love being here. So, you know, time has changed things. But thinking back to that time, I was like, yeah, this is going to be really rough. But it flicked this switch in me that was like, I need to change something else in my life soon to save myself. Because I think maybe in a way I got scared and I was reminded of what my life was like, and I was like, if I go back to that,
I'm gonna go back to that place,
we can't go back there. And so I remember getting out this pair of like beaten up Asics trainers that I'd bought with that friend that I was talking about before, when we tried to get into this gym for a little period of time. But I picked up that pair of trainers and I put it on and I was like, I'm just going to go for a run around the block. And also for reference, was 15 kilograms heavier than I am now. I had the vaping addiction of, I don't know, a chimney. I don't know if that really makes sense, but I was vaping constantly. And, you know, I wasn't athletic and I really had nothing that was sort of looking good in terms of being able to run. Like, I'm pretty sure my activewear was just like athleisure wear that wasn't even activewear. Like, it was just from Glassons. And I went for this run around the block and it was so hard. I was coughing up blood and mucus and banana vape liquid and I felt sick. And I remember I just finished it and I thought, wow, I feel fantastic. Like, I haven't done much, but I feel really good. Like, a big smile on my face. Took a selfie, sent it to Mo, and I was like, just went for a run. And then I started getting competitive with myself, and it had almost rewired me in a way to think, you know, there are other ways of feeling happy aside from what I've been doing through the escapism. And so I started running more and more and getting more and more competitive with myself, and started going out, and I think I was thrifting activewear. I didn't really have a lot of moolah, but I was like thrifting a lot of my activewear and I was running in that. And I started building up pace and distance, and eventually got to 10k, and then I would be like doing a couple of 10ks and I'd be thinking, oh yes, and I was reaching for the vape less and less because I had like I wasn't really getting the same desire like I used to, because a vape gives you, I feel, like a quick dopamine hit. For sure. It's like all dopamine. You feel good, like the quick split second. And because I was getting the endorphins from the run and they were lasting all day, they would almost do this. I had no reason to reach the vape unless I was drinking. And there were a few times where I sort of relapsed with that sort of like vaping, sort of like moving past it, because I would drink and then I'd reach for the vape. And I remember feeling so guilty the next day. And then I eventually decided to try and stop doing the vaping, but through that I knew that I needed to probably give up the drinking as well. And so I was drinking less and less, and I was saying I'll only do it on special occasions, like friends' birthdays, my birthday, that sort of thing. I'll vape and I'll drink, and it would just be like that one sort of thing, like every now and again, every few months sort of thing. And then eventually totally faded out, and this desire to enjoy my sober life really set in. And it was around that time that I started exploring the idea of like self and healing, and I was doing lots of journaling, and I initially thought it was this idea of manifestation, like you write something down and it's your goal, and then if you think about it hard enough or visualize it hard enough, it will happen like magic. And so I first got into it through like this way of manifestation, but then I think this new year rolled around and I went to my first ever run club, which was through the Breath House, and it was a few other social media people that had run it. And I did the first run, and it was an ice bath and breath work, and I got introduced to breath work on that day, and it was because the Breath House people were there. So smart, because that like literally addicted me. Like that was amazing. And I moved completely from partying and drinking and smoking to running and breathing and community, and completely changed my life. And so this year has been the best year of my life to date. Whilst I say my childhood was awesome, you know, this year has easily been like the best year of my life. I've met so many people that have not only like experienced something similar to me, but might have even like moved out of it, like, I don't know, more in a way that I can look to them essentially as a bit of inspiration. So it just opened up so many doors. And then as part of that, that's when I approached Quit. And I was like, hey, this is my story. And then Quit was like, can we do a video with you?
Yeah.
And then from the video, then Herald Sun and then Channel 7, 9, 10 got involved. And from that, then SBS texts me through Instagram and like, hey, can we fly you out to Sydney to be on our panel for the anti-vaping reform? And then I'm in Sydney. And then
what is Quit? Do you describe what that is?
So Quit Victoria's through Cancer Council.
Yeah.
It's essentially like to quit vaping. It's like a quitting vaping service.
Yes.
Through the government. Well, I think government funded. Yeah.
So you did like an interview through them and something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so I was doing that, but then also from the moment that I put on those beaten up sneakers, if we jump back a hot second, I had recorded that and put it on my story on Instagram. And so in a way, I was thinking, oh, my followers have seen me, and these were all just friends.
Yeah.
My followers have seen me put on a pair of sneakers and run. I've kind of got to keep it up, you know?
Yeah.
And so
That
then I started,
accountability.
posting it more and more, and then making little reels, and then making little videos. And I'd watch back the reel, and I'd be like, I ran 10 kilometers, and yay! And I started getting really excited about putting my content out there. And then I had girls messaging me, being like, oh my goodness, how did you get into running? Like, it's so cool. And so it initially started off as just running, but then the running moved into the journaling, and then the journaling, the breath work, and then the breath work into this sort of like holistic idea. And that is where it is at now. It is totally holistic. It's mind, body, spirit, emotionality, everything. And so like this year I ran my first half marathon.
Amazing.
I did the Peninsula Run.
Awesome.
Run Peninsula.
Right. Mornington Running Festival.
No, it was
Run the
Peninsula Running Festival, I think.
Run Pen.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, it's
organization.
Mornington.
Yeah,
The Mornington one?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
I did it, no, it was in Rosebud though. In McRae, like down there,
yeah.
So I did that, and then I think like my first 10k was like I think my pace was something like 5:30, which was
amazing.
Considering I had only been doing it for like just under a year, and I'd gone from being like a heavy smoker to that was massive.
Amazing.
And so whilst I'm not running long distances as much now, and I'm still doing like a little bit, like I've started learning about the importance of a holistic routine from doing yoga and Pilates, and I'm incorporating so many other things and not putting my pressure on myself to hit those goals, because same thing could have happened. I could have slipped into a little bit of addiction with, say, the running, and then really started to beat up my body. Like it still comes down to that fundamental idea. I even had someone say to me, you've just swapped one addiction for the next. That really offended me, because I was thinking, you don't know anything about my addiction. Like it was terrible, and I was so scared to even use that word of just like chasing after something. But running wasn't a coping mechanism. Running was my clarity of mind that got me through the day, that stopped all of that barking in my mind. It was just silence for a bit.
I think it's more like you've swapped habits, right? Addictions, like
exactly. And so in a lot of my things that I put, if the press were like, can we use swapping addiction, I would say no, can we use habit? That's why I swapped the words in the big mummy media world. I swapped addiction for habit, and I was like, it's a habit addiction, it's a dopamine swap.
100%.
You know, I'm not chasing the same thing I was.
Hey Ricky,
JT, what's up?
Just wondering, you want to go grab a coffee with me sometime?
Keen.
Keen. When are you free? Free on Saturday morning?
No, I've got a group run on Saturday.
Jeez. Sunday night, you free then?
Sunday night, I have netball.
Netball. Jeez, that sounds pretty fun.
It is fun.
Yeah. What about Tuesday? I'm free Tuesday night.
I got mixed basketball Tuesday night.
Mixed basketball. Who are you doing all these sports with? Jeez.
The active crew.
The active crew.
Yeah. Hey, do you want to come for a run on Saturday?
Yeah. Am I allowed to?
Anyone is welcome.
Oh wow, that sounds pretty good. So I can just come on down and have a run with you guys.
Yeah. There's a bit of a crew, and everyone's welcome. And we'll grab a coffee afterwards and have a bit of connection.
Sounds good. Is there anything else I can come along to?
Yeah, you can get involved with anything. We have fortnightly group rides. We have basketball mixed and men's on Tuesday nights. Thursday night men's basketball. We can chuck you in a team. We've got mixed netball on Sunday nights, which is going off. And group runs on Saturday.
Wow, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's go grab a coffee Saturday after our run then.
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.
See you then.
And so I'm like almost a year sober now, and
That's awesome.
so many like amazing community members. Like the amount of things that I've done this year that I didn't think I'd ever be able to do, considering at the place I was, is just I'm so grateful.
And talking on those habits, I've heard you talk about like habit replacement before with some of your interviews. How important do you think is it to replace habits? So obviously, like when you're just trying to drop those other things before, like the vaping, that kind of thing, trying to actually replace it with something like positive, how important do you think it is to do that?
So important, like because people do come to me then and say, what are your best pieces of advice for vapors or people that are still currently smoking? And I mean that's kind of tricky because everyone's experience is so different. I feel quite blessed that my transformation happened like very sort of like holistically and all at once, because I weaned off the vapes. There wasn't just a day where I was like, I'm quitting. I don't even think I said to myself that I was quitting until 6 months in, when I realised that I'd just been putting it down less and less. And I was really like properly like every few minutes smoking. Like I wasn't using it sort of like recreationally. It was a big part of my life. But once I found that swap, it just happened naturally.
What would be your advice for people who would like say for themselves they've got something that is an addiction? It might be drinking or vaping or something that they want to replace with something. What would you say would be some steps for them to find something to replace that with?
I like this question because I think it's a hard one. And when I first got asked it, I was just like, ooh, I almost could feel like the camera turning to me, being like, and so what are you saying to the other people now? But I would say the first thing is to just write it all down and just like get that word brain vomit out onto a piece of paper where you're just reading it and it makes sense. Because, I like the quote, a problem shared is a problem halved. I like that idea of like you're popping it on the paper and then it's halved. It's not as big and cloudy as it was when it's in your brain.
It looks a lot more insignificant when
it's in front of you. It's actually kind of simple. It's like, oh, hold on, that's actually a really small to-do list, but in my brain it was massive. So the first thing I'd do is write it down, and then the biggest thing within that is accountability. And taking accountability was something that I was always very scared of doing, mainly probably because I was in that victim to my own life mindset of life is happening to me and I just can't. Whereas as soon as I took control in that and I was like, hold on, I'm actually putting myself in this situation. When someone says something nasty to me, I'm just bowing my head. That's my fault. It's not great that they're saying that, but my reaction is my fault. I need to take accountability for that, and I need to learn how to better adapt myself. And so it's all about boundary setting as well. I started taking accountability for what had happened and what I was necessarily doing right and wrong. Because as soon as I could see that I was doing something that was detrimental to myself, I could fix it, or I could at least change it in a way that was manageable. And so, like, say for example, the drinking, I knew that the drinking wasn't good for me, and I didn't like the person that I was when I was drinking. I was leery, I was arrogant, I was rude. I would say some really sort of like, I don't know, I don't like to think of my sort of like drunk persona, because I didn't agree with anything that she was doing. She was just a really troubled person, and it was letting all of those tiny bottled up sad and angry feelings that I had were just like bubbling out and just going out into the world. And I was like, let's just go to therapy, please. Like,
alcohol really does make you vulnerable, doesn't it? It
just
shows.
And so when it came down to that, it was like taking accountability for that, and then saying, okay, well, how can we fix this? How can we take accountability for the things that we're saying when we're drunk? Can we start bringing that up in like a safe therapeutic setting? And so that's why I think therapy is so important. You're going to someone, you're speaking to them firsthand about what's going on, and you're able to then build a toolkit based on that and apply that toolkit to other situations. And they might be, because usually I do think that like addictions or those habits don't usually just surface on their own. They're followed by a few others. They've got a few friends. Like
they bring their mates
the
with
vaping
them.
they had the drinking, and the drinking then had the partying, and how it sort of goes on. And so when you sort of apply the toolkit to one thing, they all then, like a domino effect, follow suit. So it would be taking accountability and developing a toolkit to help you with that accountability taking.
Yeah, that's huge. I think people can definitely kind of take something from that and apply it to their life. And I like how you've kind of like the first step is you realise.
Thanks, Woodyard.
The first step is you kind of realizing like it's with you, and like not allowing like excuses to be the reason that you don't deal with it, like outside noise, like, you know, what other people are saying or that kind of thing, or the excuses you would make up. You're like, this is my problem that I have to deal with first, and then you're going and outsourcing like like tools that you can help with. I think that's really, really powerful.
Look, I really resonated with like the whole cold turkey thing, like, you know, developing new habits and stuff like that, because many times that I've tried to just go, all right, this is what I'm doing, and you just find yourself, you get a little bit, maybe a week down the track, and you're just like, you're in a headspace, and then all of a sudden something knocks you off, and then you're further than you were before. So I really, really liked, like just the way it just started, new habits coming through, and the dopamine from those new habits is like a longer lasting one. Like I resonate with that totally, and the drinking and you know, so it's I think that's super important to and look, I don't know much about cold turkey that works. I don't know if you've heard people that have gone cold turkey that works, but I definitely know that the little bit by little bit sort of the Kaizen thing, 1% every day, just doing one thing, and you know, the thing is, those good habits also bring their mates as well with them eventually.
Yeah.
You know, and they sort of hopefully overrule the other one. So
yeah, exactly.
So now you've said you're in a bit of a new season in your life. It's been a really amazing, you know, year this year. You've been doing a lot of things like on social media and that kind of stuff. Do you want to speak about, you know, some of the exciting things that you've been doing, or that you've got planned? In terms of all, you know, the Wellbeing with Lily side of things.
It's so funny hearing like the handle Wellbeing with Lily used. Look,
would you want to change that, or
no? I kind of like it.
Great.
You know, I put that into ChatGPT like 20 times to see like if it made sense. I came up with like a few different ones, and I remember the day that I changed it, I messaged my partner. I was like, should I just change it? Do you think people will laugh at me and think that I'm a bit cringe? And he was just like, not really. Like, I don't think people care that much.
But even if they do, like, who cares?
Look,
like,
you probably have a small amount, and that's
what I've kind of noticed is, like, even if, like, you know, some people do, like, who cares? If you want to do that, that's what you should do.
I think backing yourself is the biggest thing.
And that's,
just being
I've had
confident.
to learn that. And the boundary setting have been the hardest sort of pills to swallow. You learn them the hard way, unfortunately. If you don't back yourself, then you were just going to feel like absolute shit. So I eventually picked the name Wellbeing with Lily, and like I said, like all these big mummy media things started happening. And I said big mummy media when like someone's like following you with a massive camera, and you're like walking into a big studio, and you're like,
this is the real deal.
SBS was really cool. That was a really fun experience. So that was like, I got on a plane all on my lonesome, and I've done that before to go back home to the UK, but I've done that before to go back to the UK, but this was just sort of like, you know, felt businessy. And so I hopped on the plane and then got to Sydney and was taking like a little vlog of myself, and made my way to the hotel and sort of like nestled in. I just felt really excited and confident about the story. I got ready the next day when I got my nails done, and we filmed. It was so cool because it was like, I just remember doing like hair and makeup and feeling really grown up and feeling really proud of my story and thinking like,
so you should.
It was on, thank you. It was on the anti-vaping reform, but there were two different sides that were being shown. There was people that were sort of not wanting the vape reform to happen, and then people that did want it to happen. And so I was, you know, saying that I think the reform should happen to protect young people from experiencing essentially what I experienced, which is like just being exposed to the vaping when you're younger, and then becoming an addict to nicotine as you get older, because I think that's kind of what they are doing. Like, let's be real, these devices are so colourful and fun. They've got a cartoon on them, you can get dangly beads for them, they're cool, they give you little head spins,
lots of flavours,
it's so many flavours. They do have such a childlike presence, and whilst I do understand that, yes, that makes smoking more exciting for smokers that have, you know, gone through life wanting something a little bit more colourful, it does open it up to a new demographic. Whether that's been intentional or not, I don't know. I personally think that it might have been, because it's like, what, you're getting a young audience, and then you've got them for the rest of their life.
Why do you make a product like that in the first place? Like, what's the
Money.
real point
more
of it?
appealing, the appeal stretches
Especially
further.
because cigarettes got yeeted out the back and just covered up. And
But it's also like you pick up a packet of cigarettes and there's like a big warning. Off-putting image.
Yeah.
You get a vape and it's colourful and it's fun. It's in your back pocket and it's discreet and no one can tell.
And all like the media around it, well, what it used to be like is like, oh, it's all safe. It's like 10 times better than cigarettes, and now it's all coming out that
Exactly.
no, that's not true.
And what I love is this idea is that, like, because I would say to myself, oh, but it's not as bad as smoking. But it's like, girl, you probably wouldn't have been smoking. So it's better than smoking if you have been a smoker. But if you haven't been a smoker and you've picked it up, it's bad. Woo! Like, why are people surprised?
It's a good example of how comparison is bad.
Exactly.
You can always find something that's worse than what's going on.
But some people, unfortunately, have not been as receptive and happy about the idea of the anti-vaping stuff, because I think it feeds into that idea of guilt and, you know, it's not something you can change overnight. So what people do is, if they are vapers and they're seeing my thing and they don't agree with it, they can't change it overnight. They might be feeling a little bit guilty. Yeah. They might say something nasty, or they might do something nasty, or it might just be like, oh, Lily, you can piss off, sort of thing. And so I did cop a little bit of hate, unfortunately, from it all. But so I did this social media campaign in Sydney, and that was really cool. I came back, I think I did something else. I filmed for a current affair, and that was a little bit more brief. It was just a nice bit of experience. I got to see the headquarters of where they film. I think it was 9 News. And then I went overseas. I had a trip away, and I had some media bits planned for when I got back, but the intention was to take a bit of a break, just because I think I was copping some backlash online, especially from adult vapers or people that had vaped for a longer period of their life, that then saw me come onto the scene, and they're thinking, hold on one second, she's coming up with this, story from when she was younger, but I've been vaping my whole life and I'm 50 odd, and she wants to come in and take away my vape. Like, sorry, but and so I think that's also what it was feeding into. So lots of different perspectives on it, and that's hard as well, because that's also not really my target audience, and it's tricky because it does overlap a little bit. And my target audience is prevention for young people. It's not about taking away someone's rights or someone's source. It could be their coping mechanism in the same way that it was mine. I don't want to come away and take it away in like a political sort of perspective. Like, I just want to sort of advocate my story and then help young people. That's always what it's been about. But that unfortunately got misinterpreted. To the point where I literally had to put stories up on my Instagram being like, hey guys, like, no malice intent here. And people being like, why is she deleting comments? I'm like, literally just because I don't want my page to be a place of like hatred, and people like messaging me being like, you've lied about having pneumonia. It's like, I'm sorry, but I don't think like that's not really how it works. Or people saying, well, you didn't have pneumonia. It's like, oh, were you there? Like, like dealing with those levels of sort of like criticism. But now I'm sort of good at, like, if they come through, I'll just sort of ignore it. But I said no to a few things in that time, just to have a break. I went away, and then I came back, and I was just readier than ever. I was thinking like, this is going to be so cool. I think I had something lined up. No, there were a couple of things lined up that ended up falling to the side, only because media does that all the time. It's chopping and changing, and it's journalism, and they're following a story. And then I did probably the biggest media thing that I have done to date.
This
probably probably like a week ago now. And that was sort of like filming over a few days, and that was very exciting. And I can start to talk about that, I think, around like first week of October. I'm
just under wraps now.
So I'm not really allowed to. Sorry, guys. I can't really talk too much about that
today.
And then podcasting. So that's cool. And really, I don't know where it's going to take me, but at the moment, it's just about talking about my experience, seeing like how many people it reaches and who it resonates with. Like, again, the only like proper feedback I've had from people saying, hey, this has helped, has either been a couple of friends or the occasional person in Instagram DMs. Like, I'm talking like maybe a very small handful. People will ask me a lot about what I'm doing right now, but it won't be like, hey, your story did XYZ, and hey, like, like this is my feedback. Like, I haven't had that yet.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that that's probably to come soon.
Yeah. It's hard for that on social media as well. I feel like a lot of people are like still influenced, but they might not take the time to reach out and like actually message about it. But I think the fact that you've had a lot of like media companies and different attention in that kind of shows that you're doing the right thing and that people are influenced by it. Like, you know, they're not going to invite you on if they don't believe in your story and think it's a powerful one. So I think that's also a testament to what you're doing.
Yeah, and like, even I was speaking to a friend about it, and she was just like, just the fact that you've like had the privilege of being in these circumstances is amazing. And like, that is so correct, and so like grateful for everything that has happened. And even if, you know, it doesn't help anyone, and it's just the fact that I've said it and I'm not hiding anymore, that in itself does still feel like a bit of an achievement. So I'm not relying on the fact that there might be people that come around and say, hey, this helped, but it would be cool, because sometimes you're just like, oh, am I doing the right thing here? Like, am I saying, like, are people feeling this, or are people sort of thinking, ooh?
Yeah. Well, I feel very encouraged today from it.
Oh, thank you.
Like, I think, you know, maybe not everyone goes to a similar place, but I think like everyone goes through something that they can, you know, is hard, and it's hard when they're going through it, and, you know, to come out the other side and be able to have a story that you can tell and encourage people with, and then go and do, you know, the wellness stuff that you're doing. It's super awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Super awesome? Yeah, that's cool.
Super awesome.
Super awesome.
You can use that.
Cool.
Yeah. So is there any plans for you going forward to do anything more with like the mental health space, or the ban on vape stuff that you really want to share with an audience?
I think at the moment, well, as I said, the media stuff does like come up. Like, I literally could get an email tomorrow being like, hey, this is happening, can we come and film next week? Like, it is very sort of like just being open in terms of like my availability for that sort of stuff to happen. But I would, like, in a really ideal world, would love to step into sort of that like counselling space and helping other people in a sort of one-to-one capacity, or even in a community capacity, because that's another big thing I learned just from involving myself in these communities and making friends organically, is that it's so important, like the breath work, the run clubs. And I'm doing 2 run clubs this week. I'm doing a Friday run club and a Saturday run club, and I meet different people every single time. It's awesome. I'm going to try and do an ice bath on Saturday morning before I work an 8-hour shift. But I think that sort of like mental health direction is what I'm headed towards. And then also doing a little bit of public speaking. I did a very brief bit of public speaking recently. I received an award, and I spoke
before you go over that, do you want to speak about that award, because it was pretty cool? You were telling us beforehand.
So it's actually the old Haileybury Young Alumni Award. And I went to Haileybury, that was the school that I went to, and they do these different awards for people in past year groups. And essentially I had been nominated and received the award for community, which was very exciting. And it was sort of mainly the anti-vaping campaign, and sort of like going out and talking about it. And it was also like a perfect space to do it, because, you know, out in front of me are cohorts of, I think it was maybe year 11, year 12 students, and that's when I was vaping secretly in my bedroom. So I think based on how I've seen the trend going with vaping, there's probably a fair few people there that could be dealing with the vaping stuff themselves. So it was this interesting space of like coming out and speaking about my journey and giving a really brief, like 3-minute rundown on my journey and like vaping specifically. But I went to the pre meetup with my mum. So my mum had come with me. Initially it was meant to be my dad and my partner as well, but my mum had come with me to this pre-meetup with a few other of the recipients, and amazing recipients. Like I knew some of them. There was a girl, Jess, who was in the year above me, who actually left school and created a book to help people with the transition between leaving school and like university life. I think it was this really, and it did quite well, and she won the category for business off the top of my head. Now that could be partially wrong, but and she's really nice. So I'm sort of like standing around, we're having like a little snack and a cup of tea, and then who I got invited by is just behind us, and he goes, me, Oscar, me. And I just immediately looked at my mum and it clocked, and I was just thinking, Oscar Piastri. Now, Oscar Piastri is in my year level.
Yeah.
I didn't actually meet him though.
Yeah. For those who don't know, he's a F1 driver for McLaren. He's pretty talented.
Oh, he just won, didn't he?
Yeah, not the last race, but about a month ago he did win. Yeah. In Germany or in Hungary. Yeah.
And so that was I think it was just after that win, maybe even like a few days to a week after that win, that we were there in the assembly hall. And so I hear them talking about sport, and I turn to my mum, and my granddad and my mum love F1.
Yeah.
And so I say under my breath really discreetly, Mum, I think I might be winning the award alongside Oscar Piastri. And she looks at me and she just bursts into laughter. Yeah. And she's like, she had a mouthful of food as well, so she starts choking. So she's like crying with laughter and choking on this. And there's like the whole, like, these are some big guns that are like on to score. Then I'm like, just cough over there discreetly. And so she's laughing and laughing and laughing. I was like, look, I'm not sure. That could be totally wrong. I'm not sure. She turns to me, she's like, Lil, you don't understand. He's really famous. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, just... Anyway, so we go in, and they've said to me that I'm making the acceptance speech. So we walk onto the assembly hall, and I don't even think I took on my blazer. I was wearing this like pretty ghastly outfit. My hair was kind of messy because I'd just come from Pilates. Like I was very chaotic. Like quickly finished my like bagel, and then they're like, oh, you're walking onto the stage right now. And so we're like walking onto the stage, and I'm sitting next to like the head. I'm like on the front row with like I think it's the principal, dean, CEO. I don't know. It's like, I think big dogs. Yeah. And I'm sitting like on the front row with them, and they start like coming up with all the candidates, and then so I'm presented in between Kenji Fujihara, and off the top of my head, so he's in New York and he's working with like Cancer Cure, and then Oscar Piastri for sport, and then Lily Ford for community. And so I just looked into the audience, and it's like it's massive. It's like there's the front, and then there's like this big sort of like top seating area. And you just see my mum laughing. And I go up to receive my award, and I get to the front, and I'm like, on behalf of all the recipients today, me receiving an award on behalf of all of them. Yeah. And I think, well, to some people it might seem funny. To some people they'd be like, no, you should give yourself the credit. And and I was like, well, I don't know. It does feel like my transformation is, you know, very sort of uniquely my own in a way, and I do want to help as many community people as possible by inspiring, but it still feels like I'm just a little baby fish in the big sea of people to inspire. And I was just thinking like, ooh, I don't know what that is. They just maybe it's not feeling good enough. But I was like, am I good enough to be here right now? Accepting an acceptance
imposter
speech
syndrome.
on behalf of these people. And so I was just sort of like, I don't know. But that could
you
just
have a
be
powerful story.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And they haven't been on this podcast, so you're kind of a big deal.
Oscar, if you do want to come on here, we'll allow it.
You will allow it, yeah.
So how can people keep up with you and get connected into some of the stuff you do?
So it's really just mainly through Instagram. Instagram is my main outlet. TikTok I do use, but TikTok is just a funny one because it's like you have to post stupid funny videos that just are mostly text.
Yeah.
And if it's not funny and if it's not engaging, then it gets like a very measly amount of views. Sometimes
we've noticed that like we post all of our like reels on TikTok, and the ones that are serious, it's like no one wants to watch it. No. And you just post a stupid one that takes 2 seconds and everyone wants to watch it. So
shows the demographics, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah.
So TikTok is I have a very similar like audience number, yet very different demographics. Like I feel like Instagram is more sort of like people that know me, businesses, media stuff, whereas the TikTok is like young people that just like my goofy wellness stuff. And sometimes it's not very on brand either. Like it's sort of I've got to remind myself that there's a bit of a niche going on, and I've got to stick to it. Otherwise it would just be like videos and be like, get ready with me today. It's like but yeah, so they're sort of
also
like
could be good content.
my main two outlets that I use the most.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Well, we definitely think that our listeners will be able to like gain something from your story, and once you have that exciting new media thing get announced in a few weeks, we'll be able to share that with our listeners definitely, and get them connected to that.
100%. Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. It feels very sort of like stepping into the dark, but that's all right. It's the fun of it.
It's exciting. Yeah. Look, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Like we said, your story is really powerful, and I know that our listeners will get a lot out of this. There's a lot of little takeaways in there. So we really appreciate you coming on.
That's okay, no worries.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Active Hub podcast. Don't forget, if you like this, or someone might get something out of this episode, make sure you share it with them. Follow Lily as well, and we'll see you next time for our next guest.